Hakadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yevamot Daf 78:1. We were just speaking about when Rabbi comes and he says, "Mistabra milta de Rav." It's mistaber that when Rabbi comes and he says that it's for sure mamzer. We're talking about the lo daiman mineh, which means she's not chashuda from the arus, which means that he doesn't admit that he had relations with her. The daima me'alma, but she's chashuda from other people. So the fact that other people, remember, this is talking about an arus and arusa. He doesn't admit that he had relations with his arusa, which is the betrothed woman, but she suspected that maybe it came from other people. So because of that, we're going to say for sure that it's going to be a vaday mamzer. Aval daima mina. But if she's chashuda from the arus, which means that he admits that he had relations with the arusato, with his betrothed wife, even though she's also suspected from other people, but we are going to come and say that the blood goes after him, because since he admits that he had relations with her, so therefore it's en safek motzimi devadai. The husband is a vadai. Anybody else is safek. So en safek motzimi devadai. So therefore we're going to say that for sure it came from him and it didn't come from other people. Rabbi is now going to bring a proof to his words. Amar Rabbi says, Mena anina la, how do we know this? Tektani, because we learned in a Mishnah. Yalda, if right now she had a child, Tochal, she's allowed to come and eat in Truma. Why? Because we say that the child is from a Kohen. So says the Gemara, hey, Chidami, what is the case? Remember, we're talking about Bat Israel, that she was seduced from a Kohen. So if she has a child, she's allowed to eat in Truma. Hey, Chidami, what is the case? If we're going to tell you now that she suspected that the Kohen, he admitted that he had relations with her, but he seduced her. And she never was suspected for anybody else. So you have a hamamina that you're not allowed to eat, that the Gemara says you have to eat. Obviously, why not? If we know that this girl is a kosher bat Israel, and then we know that she was seduced, she says it, and then he admits to it. So then why wouldn't we believe it? He admits that he seduced her. She said, she's the kosher bat Israel. We're not going to suspect her for anybody else. So for what's going to be with the child? The child obviously going to come from the Kohen, and therefore obviously she can eat. We're also suspecting it from the world. And just like over there in the Mishnah, that this is the case of a Kohen, which is Nisul, and this is the case of other people, which is going to be Nisul. But we're going to throw it to him, which means that we're going to say that the child comes from the Kohen, and we know that for sure had relations with her. Hacha by the Arus, that has relations with Arusato, that for one person it's going to be Nisul, and one person it's going to be Ayeter. Look, Kol Sheken. Are we not talking about now a Kol Sheken? And we're not talking about that there's not all the more so. So answers the Gemara. Elmaleh, Rabbi comes and he tells him, Leolam I'm going to tell you no. Kol Hechal de daima me'alma, afal gav de daima mineh, amarav v'dan mamzer. According to what we're saying is says the Rabbi, he's arguing on Rav. And he comes and he says, any time that she's suspected from other people, even though she suspected also from the Arus, because the Arus said that he had relations with his Arusato, which means that I could say, listen, it came from the boyfriend, came from the fiancé. Still, the fact that she's also suspected from other people, the Rav said, the Lamam said. Why? Because since there's a call, right, there's a rumor that she's also sleeping around, she's having relations with other people, we go up to the majority of the world, and not the Arus. So therefore, that's it. There's nothing more to do. The child is a mamzer. Mamzer, it's a powerful statement. You know what that is? Umatniti, but our Mishnah, there was no room. Meaning we think she's 100% a kosher bat Israel. And the fact that we think she's 100% a kosher bat Israel, there's no problem. Yeah, no problem. Why? Because we're not going to suspect anything. Fine. 2 dots. Okay? Ha'eved. Ha'eved is posel mishum bi'ah ve'eno posel mishum zera. What does that mean? If a bat kohen, right? So if the bat kohen ayam Israel, so now if the bat kohen right, from the Israel has an Kenani, he does not prohibit her from eating teruma. Okay? So the Gemara asks, my tama, why not? At the end of the day, she has a child. Yeah? So she comes and he says, Amar Ka, the Pasuk says, Haisha biladea tiela donea. What does that mean? The vlad of a Shukha Kananit is an Eved Kanani like her. And therefore it doesn't go after the father of Israel. So for if it doesn't go after the father of Israel, Nimila, it doesn't go after the mother as well. So therefore, remember, you have a Bat Kohen. The Bat Kohen, if she doesn't have a child, she gets divorced or widowed, she goes back to her father's house. If she goes back to her father's house, and we just read in this last week, what happens? She's allowed to eat in teruma. So now all of a sudden here, she doesn't have a child, but it's an Evet Kanani. So the fact that it's only going to be an Evet Kanani, and it's not Mityaches after the father, Umi Meila, it's not going to be Mityaches after the mother. So therefore, what happens is she's still allowed to come and have teruma. Next two dots. Mamzer, posel, uma'achid. A mamzer is going to be posel. That means a mamzer is posel a bat kohen from eating teruma, and he's going to be ma'achid also. But he's going to give a bat to Israel to eat teruma, right? Because he was a kohen. Okay, so Tanu Rabbanan movement to learn a Braita. Vezera inna b'shaval betavia kimudea. Rabbi lechem avia tochel. It says in the pasuk, when she doesn't have children, she goes back to the father's house, just like in her maiden status, and then she's going to come and she's going to eat. En yanazarah, that's only her children, right? Zera shela, which is her son or her daughter from Israel, which is going to be poselota from Teruma. Zera zarah. How do we know that, for example, a grandchild from the Israel, right, that it's going to be poselota? Tamulumar v'zera enna. En, right, is written en aleph yod non. The fact that it's written en aleph yod non, it's mikol makom, even zera zara, which means not only the zara, even zera zara, children of children, any type of even of children is going to be the same halacha. En yela zera kasher, but that's only going to be zera kasher. Zera pasul minay. How do we know zera pasul is going to be the exact same halacha? Tamumar v'zera enla ayena la. So therefore, it teaches you zera enla. Again, en is written aleph yod non, which is maleh, which means full. Because you could write en aleph nun. But the fact that you wrote en aleph yod non, right? So therefore, it says ayen aleh. You go up. What does that mean? That even if she has any type of a zera, even if it's going to be zera pasul, it's going to be matilota to eating teruma. So says the Gemara. 1 second. From the same en, I thought that with this yod, you came and you included grandchildren to come and to teach her that it's going to be posel, not that it's going to be ma'achid. So he says, I didn't need for the grandchildren. Why? Grandchildren are like children. So when do you need this pasuk? Zera pasul, right? To do a zera pasul. That's when you don't need it for regular grandchildren. Regular grandchildren, they're your children. Grandchildren are your children. But here, zera pasul is different. So Amaleh Shakish, the Rabbi Yochanan, right, where Ayin Amudalef, right before the finishing of the Perek, says Amaleh Shakish, Rabbi Yochanan says Shakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Keman, who does this Mishnah go like? Obviously, Rabbi Akiva, that says Yesh Mamzeh B'chai Velav. If you remember, we actually said this in Mishnah. There's a machloket, when is there a Mamzeh? According to Rabbi Akiva, if a goy or an Eved has relation to the Bat Israel, the child is a Mamzeh. But that's Chai Velav. That's in Isur Lav. So therefore, we paskin to do not think about it, right? How many times do you have that a goy has relation with a Jewish woman? A goy gets married to a Jewish woman. If you're gonna tell me that the child is a mamzeh, so then what do I care that the child is Jewish, but the child's a mamzeh, right? So therefore, anyway, they can't get married to anybody else, right? You have that all over the place. You have a Jew getting married to, right? No, sorry, this is the opposite. You have the goy getting married to a Jew. The child is Jewish, correct? So you're right. There's a Moshe Feinstein. You shouldn't accept them to the Jewish day schools. You shouldn't do a lot of things. Why? Because of problems. You understand? Because then what happens is you open up the door that these things are permitted. There's a tshuva. Think about it. You know what it means? A tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein. I remember they used this tshuva. Where did they use it? Yeah? They used the tshuva. What does that mean? That means there's a tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein. You would think, well, 1 second. It's a Jewish child. Right? Do everything normal. No. 1 second. Be very, very careful. Why? Because at the end of the day, right, you open up a can of worms. You come and you start saying to people, it's permitted to do what you want. So there's a whole tshuva where Moshe finds in Shut Igrot Moshe that he speaks about such a case. However, though halacha l'maaseh, he's not a mamzer. So you would say it was a mamzer. What? Well, okay, you know, but Ben Adidah, by the way, Ben Adidah has nothing to do with the goy. And Ben Adidah יכול להיות שתי יהודים. Ben Adidah, the parents are not religious. Parents are not religious, right? They not have relation. She's an Idah. She never went to mikveh. That's Ben Adidah. But it doesn't make him pasul. It's true. Shulchan Aruch brings down. No, but Ben Adidah, but they're team chayvek mitut, right? That's correct, right? But here, though, we're talking about the is which one? The father, not for the kid. Right? Ben Adidah, the Shulchan Aruch brings down that a person needs to be careful because usually they don't have good midot. Because since a person went with his wife when she was in Idah, so by the Yerusha, which means when it goes down in the midot, that was a chutzpah that right now she was in an unclean state, and therefore it has an effect on children. So therefore the halachai brings down, fine, but what happens now if they did teshuvah, and let's say the ben Nidah now is a chozer b'teshuvah shlema, is a full yeshiva, so what you shouldn't do, you shouldn't get married to them. So there's a whole question on halachai. Usually they're more lenient that they say that as long as he's mamash ben Torah, he actually cleaned up his midot, but it's actually brought down in halachah, Shulchan Aruch, and then it's the poskim. Right? Why? Because of such a case. You know, it's a Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, so it says like this. Even if you're going to tell me it's a rabbi, they are going to admit that even if it's going to be an eved or an eved or an oved kochavim that has relations with the Bat Israel, even though they're in a surim belav, still is a blood as mamzer. תחיית הרבדים יאמר מצווה ברבדים משום רבנו, עובד כוכבים ועבד הבא בת ישראל ולא ממזר. So it comes out that even though according to Rabbi Yosef, he says halachas like chachamim, that there's no mamzer ela mechai v'kritut. Our Mishnah could go even according to chachamim, that according to chachamim, eved ve'notri abal bat Israel havlad mamzer. Now we're coming and saying there's not only Rabbi Akiva, it's Rabbi Akiva and chachamim. No, but this is the thing about it. We have to understand why not. So at the end, it's not just Rabbi Akiva. It's Rabbi Akiva and Chachamim that are saying, but we have to check it out. It says the two dots. Kohen Gadol pe'amin sheposel. Sometimes the Kohen Gadol is going to disqualify his grandmother from eating truma. Kuza is a small jug, right? That is giving me truma. Any kapara ben biti kadam, but it's not going to be the ben biti of a kad, which is a bigger, which is a kad kohen gadol. Sheposeli mitruma, that is going to be posel otem mitruma. Hadran almana le kohen gadol. Now we're going to start now the next chapter. Perek Shemini, the 8th chapter. He'arel is a kohen that is uncircumcised. He did not have a brit milah. Why? We're not talking about mashrir shayim. That means we're not talking about a rashad. Because the brothers, they died or whatever the case is. V'chol ha'tameim, or anybody that was tameh, meaning a kohen that became tameh, and he didn't purify himself. Lo yochelu b'truma, they are prohibited from eating teruma, because obviously a kohen is not allowed to eat teruma. Neshehen ve'avdehen, however, though their wives and their slaves, yochlu b'truma, they are allowed to eat teruma. Why? Because they themselves are surim because of a technical difficulty, logistics that they themselves either aleh or truma, but their wives and everything else, they have no problem of eating truma. Petzua daka, ukrut shofah. So we already told you, petzua daka, one of the, I think the 4 or 5 places in the entire Torah, right? Petzua daka, ukrut shofah. So we're talking about now, these are ba'alim mumim in the male organ. So it's like it's a defect in the male organ, which we're going to explain. Now, these people are surim davo bakat, so they're not even right. You know, said Bati said. Now, they were kohanim, hen ve'avdehen yochel, right? They and their slaves are allowed to eat truma. Because at the end of the day, they're kohanim. Unshehem lo yochel. But since now they're not allowed to get married, if they come now and they got married to a woman, they prohibit them to the keuna. Because if they're not allowed to lavo bakahal, right? That means certain people are not allowed to lavo bakahal because of their status. So, for example, mamzer. Right, Kuti or all the the Natin Mamzer, all these we had a whole thing there, the list, if you remember, right? All this entire list. But here though, it's a different reason. Here we're talking about because they weren't allowed to come to Kali, because they have a problem in their male organ, it's a defect. And therefore, if they come and they get married, they disqualify their wives from Kihuna. So he says, Lo yeda. However, though, right, if he did not know, which means, right, right, that means Lo yeda. Here means, right, just like Mateda, right, Yeda Adam, all these are Yeda means mamash, knowledge, as they say, the true knowledge, right, which is relations. It says over here, which means that what happens if he was already married? He was married, and then only afterwards there was an accident, and now he became a kuchofcha or a pitzur daka. In such a case, they're allowed to come and to have truma. Why are they allowed to have truma? Because since when they got married, they were 100% kosher. So therefore, now that they became disqualified, their wives didn't become pasul from truma or anything. Everything was a kosher wedding. Everything was not from. Yeah, exactly. איזהו פצוע דקה. מה זה פצוע דקה? כל שנפצוע בצים שלו ואפילו אחר כך. So פצוע דקה, פצוע is like, what is it even, you said in modern name, what is נפצע? Right, פצוע. So כל שנפצוע בצים, that means the eggs, the testicles were the ones, right, which were damaged. And even in one of them is already enough. What is קרוט שופחה? שנכרת הגיד, the gid itself, which is the actual, yes, the actual gid was right. But if he still has from the crown, even like a chuta sera, which means that even if part of the gid was cut, right, but it still had the chuta sera, kasher, he's still going to be kosher, but it's not considered a true shofar. Okay, fine. Next, says the Gemara. Tanya, we learned in the Braita. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, Minayin la'arel she'en ochel b'tuma. How do we know that an adel cannot eat truma? So it says in the pasuk, Ne'emar toshav v'sachid b'Pesach. The Ne'emar toshav v'sachid b'truma. It says toshav v'sachid by Korban Pesach. That's in Shemot. Yeah, the next, yes, right. Shemot Yudbet, which is basically by the Korban Pesach. What? That's the next one. 1 second, by truma. You're right. One more time. You guys don't let me finish. Ne'emar toshav v'sachid b'Pesach. Where's Pesach? It's not by Emor. It's Shemot Yudbet Nemhei Parashat Bo. Toshav v'sachid lo yochal bo. We just read it on Pesach. Yeah, that's the first one. The second one is what you guys are just saying. 1 second. V'ne'emar toshav v'sachid b'truma. The second one is Parashat Emor that we just read, which is toshav v'sachid by eating tiruma, because this parasha spoke about all the different halachot of tiruma. So says the Gemara, Ma toshav v'sachid amur b'Pesach arei l'asur bo, just like by the toshav v'sachid by Korban Pesach, which again one more time is Parashat Bo. There it's written that somebody that does not have a brit milah and arel is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. V'chol arel lo yochal bo. Toshav v'sachid amur b'truma. So too the toshav v'sachid, which is written by truma, arel asur bo. Okay, so that is going to be the first limud. One more time. Toshav v'sachid by Pesach, toshav v'sachid by truma. Toshav v'sachid by Pesach is written mefurash arel yochal bo. By toshav v'sachid by truma, it's not written. I'm applying the two halachot together, so therefore arel lo yochal bo. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Eno tzarich. I don't think this is Rashava, Toshav v'sachid. One from Pesach, one from Emor, right? Parashat Bo, Emor. I don't need it. Why? Harehu Omer, it does say in the parasha itself of Emor, Ish Ish. What does Ish Ish mean? He says all the Tmeim are not allowed to eat in Truma, right? Because it says so why does it say Ish Ish? Ish Ish lerabot he'arel, that he's also tameh. That means he's got the same din as a tameh, and therefore he's a sur lechol b'truma. So means I don't have to do a gzera shabbat from the same pasuk when it says about that a person cannot eat truma. It spoke about zav, sarua, all these tzarat, right? Or zav, right? All ish. The ish is coming to include anadel. So anadel is also truma, just like any other type of tameh of zav or tzarut. So it's a machloket between the Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Everybody agrees about halacha. Just where do you learn it? Okay. Next, Aman Mor says Rabbi Eliezer Omer Rabbi Eliezer said Toshav v'sachid b'Pesach Toshav v'sachid b'Truma. Ma Toshav v'sachid b'Amor b'Pesach arei l'asur bo. Toshav v'sachid Hamor b'Truma arei l'asur bo. Says the Gemara, Mufne. What does it mean, Mufne? It has to be available. It has to be panui. Right? Mutar. Why? He comes and he says, which means the Toshav v'sachid has to be mufne. Why? The ilav mufne, because if it's not going to be mutar, if it's not going to be mufne available, ikal mifrach, you could ask against it. What's the question that you could ask? Male pesach sheken chayvim alav mishum pigul v'notar v'tameh. Pesach has a whole bunch of chumrot. What are the chumrot? One chumrah is pigul. One of them is notar, and another one is tameh. What does that mean? Pigul is if a person comes and does a sacrifice of a korban pesach, and he thought of eating it, right, not at the proper time. It's called pigul. That's one problem, the defect. Notar. What is notar? Leftovers. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What is the next one? Notar. What is notar? Leftovers. Let's say he left the korban pesach until the next morning, whatever it is, and then he comes, he starts. That's notar, right? And then he eats it. It's a problem. Okay. Or he comes and he says v'tameh. He was eating it when he was a tameh. So now the one that's eating it in b'shogeg is going to be chayav chata. Now, since it's so chamur that the Torah was therefore since it's so chamur, the Torah was said even in anarel. But by truma, there's no such thing as pigul notan. And if you eat it with tameh, you're not going to be chayav chatat. Okay, there's mitam deshamayim, but remember the chayav chatat is only that if you eat it, you're chayav mitah. Right? Not chayav mitah deshamayim, so there's no chatat. So the question is, maybe by truma, right? Which means that it's one more time. We mean a gzera shava. What's the gzera shava? Gzera shava was toshav esachid by Pesach, toshav esachid by truma. Just like by Pesach, arel lo yochal bo, written mefurash. So too by truma, even though it's not written, arel lo yochal bo. I apply both halachot together, right? Pesach and truma. Gzera shava. I use the same words here. Toshav esachid, the same words here. Toshav esachid. I applied the halachot which are here to here. It's called gzera shava. Now says the Gemara, it had to be mufne. What does it mean mufne? I cannot learn anything from the pasuk of Pesach. Why? Because if it was not mufne, I could ask against it. What could I ask against it? If you're applying two halachot together, right? This is also law. What do they do in common law? They want to come and say, what are you talking about? It's not compare the two cases. Therefore, don't come and start bringing me case, whatever it is about Johnson and Johnson, I don't know what, about A, B, C, D. It doesn't apply, and therefore don't tell me the halachot over there. So the exact same thing, obviously, this is to Tara and that's Tum'ah. The concept though is that what's happening? We have a case here of Toshav Esachid. If it's not going to be Mufne, I can ask a big question. What are you talking about? You're comparing Pesach to Truma? Pesach is much more hamur than Truma. Why? Pesach, you have a problem of Pigul. Truma, there's no problem with Pigul. Truma, you separated Truma. Pigul by Truma. No time, leftover. You have to eat it by it. You could keep Truma for whatever time you want. But there's no notar. And even if you're going to eat it when you're tameh, you're right. Eating truma when you're tameh is chayav mitah b'deshamayim. But it's not the korban pesach that you're eating it tameh, right? You get karet and you get it's a much higher level. You're saying it's a much, therefore don't compare both cases. So therefore the Gemara says, obviously it has to be mufneh. Because if it's not mufneh, it's not going to help. So says the Gemara, la ye afnu mufneh. So therefore you're right. You have to say that it's going to be mufneh. Because if it's not mufneh, you could, how do you call it? You could rebuttal it, you could dismantle it in 2 seconds. You're going to get rid of it in 2 minutes. Okay? So says the Gemara, Hai mufneh. Which one is mufneh? Is mufneh the one of the Truma, or is it mufneh the one of Pesach? Because we didn't say that they both have to be mufneh, meaning on both sides of the coin. We just said it had to be mufneh. But which one has to be mufneh? So says the Gemara, Hai mufneh. Which one is mufneh? Eat the truma. If you're going to tell me it's the truma where it says over there, Toshav V'Sachir by truma is mufneh, Nitzrach Tzicha, you need it by truma. Why? Titania was learned in the Braita, Toshav ze kanui kinyan olam, which is Eved Ivri Nitzah. Right? What does it mean Toshav V'Sachir? What is it Toshav? Toshav is an Eved Ivri, that he was your slave. Remember, an Eved Ivri, once you're your slave until Shemitah. Once Shemitah comes, he goes up free. What happens afterwards? He wants to stay with you. What do? You pierce his ear, right? And then what happens? He stays leolam. What is leolam? Until the Yovel, which that's leolam. Okay, fine, 50 years. Okay. So says the Gemara, that's what Toshav is. Sachir, ze kanui kinyan shanim. What is a sachir? Sachir is a stam evedivri that he goes after 6 years. So therefore, the Amer, Toshav, so ask the Gemara 1 second. If it's written, right, that Toshav is sachir that cannot eat truma, so just say Toshav, and you don't have to say Sachir. If I'm going to tell you that you have a slave forever, again, it doesn't mean forever, it means until you're there, right? Every Ivri Nitzah. If I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you have a slave until 50 years, and he cannot eat truma, so kal v'chomer, a slave only for 6 years is not going to eat truma. If I told you toshav, I don't need to tell you a sahib. So says the Gemara, v'ani omer, and I'm going to tell you, kinyan, kanui kinyan olam, eno ofer. Kanui kinyan shanim lo kol sheken. I'm going to tell you, I don't understand. If you have an eved, mamatz, he should have it for 50 years, and still he cannot eat truma. Kal v'chomer, if it's going to be just for a few years, not going to eat truma. So says the Gemara, iluken, if it would have been like that, Hayiti Omer, I would say, Toshav ze kinyan shanim, right? Aval kinyan, kanui kinyan olam, ochel. If I would have only said the word Toshav, I would have said that the Toshav is the Eved Ivri of Sheshanim. You understand? Meaning that I needed Toshav Sahib to tell you one of them is an Eved Ivri of Olam, and one of them is the Eved Ivri of Sheshanim. Because if I didn't tell you both, and I would have only told you Toshav, I would have told you the Toshav is an Eved Ivri of Sheshanim. And therefore, he cannot eat, right, the truma. But a toshav, or not a toshav, but an eved ivri, which is a leolam. So sure, he could eat truma. So therefore, was a sahib toshav. So the sahib is here to teach you what is a toshav. Meaning, I need the sahib to teach you what is a sahib and what is a toshav. And even though he's going to become, and he's going to be kanoi kinyan, so therefore, you still need it. So for this is a proof that what? That we need the Toshav Sahib by Truma. Because if it wasn't written Toshav Sahib by Truma, I would have thought that an Eved Ivri would be able to come and to eat Truma. So it's not extra. I need it. Ella, the Pesach Mufne. Says the Gemara, rather than the Pesach has to be Mufne. What does it mean Pesach has to be Mufne? Hai Toshav Sahib, the Ketav Rachmana, the Pesach Mani. What is the Toshav Sahib that the Torah says by the Pesach? He comes and he says, Inema Toshav Sahib Mamash. If you're going to tell me that it's Toshav Sahib Mamash, right? If you're going to tell me that by the Pesach, it's Toshav Sahib Mamash. That means basically, again, we're talking about an Eved Ivri Nitzah, the Stam Eved Ivri. Mishum Davale Toshav Sahib Yipatal in Pesach. What? Only because he becomes an Eved Ivri, now he's Patur, right? A Toshav Sahib, now he's Patur from a Pesach. But Kaimalan, Truma, we already learned that he does eat Teruma. Ayin Amubet, 70b. Alma lo kana le Rabbi. So therefore, his master does not acquire him. So so too by the Korban Pesach, the goof is not kanui l'Rabbi. So he's a Yisrael Gamur. So obviously, he should be chayav Pesach, right? So therefore, why did the Torah then say that a Toshav Sahib is in a full Pesach? Rather coming to teach you that it's extra, it's miutar, and it's only coming to teach you about the Gezerah Shava, which means one more time. Everyone understood about the Pesach. The Pesach, one more time. By the Pesach, it's written Toshav Sahib, right? It's written over there that they cannot come and eat from the Korban Pesach. Now the question is, why? So he says, Mishum David, what? Because Toshav Sahib is Patur. If we already learned by Truma, he cannot eat Truma, it means it's on his kinyan. If it's not his kinyan, obviously it should still be chayav then Korban Pesach. But rather, right, he says over here, right? He comes and he says over here, that what? Obviously, that it's coming to be lafniyeh. So says the Gemara, ve'akati, but still, mufne mitzad echad. It's only a fluyeh from one side. Meaning, if you remember, we just said which one is extra. We brought two different sukim, one by Korban Pesach, one by the Truma. The Truma we said was it extra? Was the Truma pasuk extra? No. Which pasuk was extra? Pesach. So says the Gemara, that's called mufne mitzad echadu. That means it's mufne, but only on one side of it. Only on one side. Which side? The side of the Pesach. So the Shamina and the Rabbi Eliezer, so we learned the name of Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar that he said, mufne mitzad echad lemetin meshlimim. If it's mufne from one side, you could learn it Shabbat from it. But you could ask the question against it. Meaning like this. If you're going to come and you're going to tell me that it's both of them are mufne, meaning it's mufne mishne tzaddim, right? What happens? So then lemedin ben meshivim. You learn from it and you can't ask questions against it. Why? Because the fact that the Torah made it superfluous on both sides of the equation, meaning on both sides of the coin, also by Pesach and also by Truma. So you make the Gezerah Shabbat, you can't ask any questions. Korban Pesach is stronger, meaning because of the Chumrot, doesn't matter. If it's only going to be on one side, you learn a Gezerah Shabbat from it, but you could ask questions against it to defer it, to rebuttal it, to get rid of it. And if it's not mufne at all, so then according to Allah, she told you can't even learn from it, but you can't do anything from it. So the question is, 1 second, here it's only mufne mitzadecha, and since it's only going to be mufne mitzadecha, right? Lemedin, but you could ask the question against it. We already asked the question against it. We said the Korban Pesach is much stricter. So what are you coming and what are you trying to teach? So says the Gemara, since legufe, which means the toshav esachid, you don't need shadi chad alamed v'shadi chad amelamed. Says no. Since the toshav esachid, which is brought down by the Pesach, you don't need it by the Pesach in itself, right? Because there's 2 extra words, right? And not only just one. So shadi chad alamed, the shadi chad amelamed. One of them you're using for the lamed, and one of them you're using it for the milam. Which is the milamed? The Pesach. The Pesach means milamed to the truma. The truma is lamed. Is you learning? You're learning and then you're teaching. The teacher is the Korban Pesach, which that is v'arei lo yochal bo. The one that is being taught, you're teaching it to, right? The lamed is the truma. So therefore, you're applying it to halachot. So therefore, since by Pesach it was extra, right, and then you didn't need them at all, so I'm throwing one of the words by Pesach, one of the words by Teruma, and now it's going to be okay. Now it's going to be considered a Gzera Shava, which is going to be empty, not empty, free, right? There's going to be panuim, free, that's the word I used before. Mutal, extra, right? Superfluous. There's going to be superfluous on both sides. Says the Gemara, Ima Pesach, onen asur bo, af Truma onen asur bo. 1 second. If you're already applying the halachot of Pesach to the halachot of Truma, so therefore Anonen does not eat from the Korban Pesach. So too also by Truma, maybe Anonen cannot eat. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, Amar Ka, it says in the pasuk, V'chol zar lo yochal bo. V'chol zar lo yochal bo is extra, because you already told me in the pasuk Yod, which was 3 pasukim beforehand, that the zar cannot eat, right, from the Torah. Okay, which means that the zar cannot eat. Why did it say v'chol zar lo yochal bo? So it says zarut amarti lecha ve'lo ani. Only when a person's a zar, but not anonen. Anonen korit truma. We're talking about again kohen. It's only a kohen could eat truma, but a kohen onen could eat truma. A zar cannot eat truma. So if we don't learn it from the Korban Pesach, so it says the Gemara, eima ve'lo arelut. Says 1 second, maybe it's zarut amarti lecha ve'lo arelut. So why is an arel mutar to eat truma? So says the Gemara, right? Aktiv toshav esachid. 1 second, you already told me. It's a gzera shava that an arel is a sul bitruma, but it says toshav esachid. So says the Gemara, Umar ra'ita. Why are you telling me from the gzera shava that toshav esachid teaches you that an arel is a sul nearing truma, and the whole zar is teaching you that an onen is mutar? Maybe it's the opposite. Toshav esachid in the gzera shava is teaching you that an onen is a sul in truma. And from the pasuk, v'chol zar, it should teach you that an arel is mutar. Yeah, you understood? Meaning flip it. One more time. I have an inclusion and an exclusion. The inclusion is v'chol zar lo yochal bo, zar lo, onen yes. A stranger cannot eat truma, an onen could eat truma. I have an exclusion. What's the exclusion? Toshav esachid by Pesach, toshav esachid by truma, chol arel lo yochal bo. An arel cannot eat it. Says the Gemara, maybe do the flip. Maybe toshav esachid by Pesach to toshav esachid by truma. Just like by Pesach, an onen does not eat a korban Pesach. So to toshav esachid by truma, an onen does not eat truma. It says the whole zar lo yochal bo, zar cannot eat it. Zar lo, but who yes? An arel. Flip it. Says the Gemara, mistabra areluta v'le rebuye. It's more mistaber to say that arelut we should have included to the psul, right? Why? Because the psul of arelut is worse than a psul of aninut in certain occasions. Sheken, maasim, prutim, midvar ha'eved, whatever these things, right? Mechusar maaseh, maaseh begufo, anush karet, yeshlo lifnei adibur, umilat zecharav avadam me'akever. Meaning, what is more strict? Arel or onen? Says the Gemara, an arel is more strict than onen. Why? First of all, right, an arel is mechusar maaseh, which means in order to be machshir oto, right? You have to do what? You have to do a brit milah, right? Ma'aseh milah, right? So therefore, that's why arel is more stricter than aninut. Aninut, you don't have to do anything. Right? A person becomes onen automatically. The person passes away, he becomes onen. There's no ma'aseh there. Ma'aseh begufo. You have to do something in the body of the arel. You don't have to do the body of an onen. An onen, there's nothing done to the onen. Onen is onen, right? No, 1 second. You're right. Anush karet, number 3, a person that's an arel, right, is chayav karet. So therefore, a person that's an onen didn't do anything wrong. A person becomes onen automatically. Yesh no lifnei dibur, number 4. What does that mean, lifnei dibur? Right? It says over here, the mitzvah milah was already by Abraham Avinu before even Matan Torah. So for it to be lifnei dibur, right? By the way, this is where the acronym was over there. Ma'asim krutim bidvar ha'evet. Number 4, it comes and he says milat zecharav ba'avadah. When he has the brit milah of his zecharim of the avadim, right? That means, let's say a person has a child, so he has to do a brit milah to him, or an evet tinani, he has to brit milah, right, to his evet. So it says over here, the father or the master cannot eat the korban pesach as long as he didn't do the brit milah to them. So therefore, by aninut, it's only they don't have all these chumrot. So therefore, it's much more better to come and to do the gzirah shabbat to take out, and you say to exclude, right, the arel, and you're going to have the chul zar to include aninut and the other way around, because of these chumrot. So says the Gemara, Adra, opposite. Aninut should have added in aninut. Why? Sheken yeshna b'chol shah, right? A person could become onen, right? This is actually the opposite of what the doctor said. But the doctor just said, 1 second, arel is all the time that he doesn't do brit milah. An onen, no. Says the Gemara, no, but the opposite. Because the onen could be at any moment. Any moment, a family member could pass away. And if at any moment a family member could pass away, that's a problem. Number 2, men and women are aninut, right? Men and women are not arel. A woman is not arel. It's only by a man, right? Number 3, yeah? They're falling like flies. Yeah? He comes and he says, yeah, ואין בידו לתקן את עצמו. Yeah, he comes and he says, you cannot do anything to take yourself out of it. Which means, right, by an arel, he could fix himself. He goes, he gets the brit milah done. But by aninut, he can't do anything to himself. Right? It's not dependent upon him. So says the Gemara, 1 second, but how many did you have? How many did you have the chumrot of the arel? And how many did you have the chumrot of the aninut? Arel, you had 4. How many did you have by aninut? 3. So says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Even with everything that you just said, at the end of the year, 4 against 3. So if I prefer to exclude arel and to include aninut. Rabbi says, even without this, I could still answer you this. Arel is written with furash in the pasuk in Pesach. And we learn aninut from Pesach, meaning we're learning truma from Pesach. Let's learn aninut. The Pesach kufemi ma'aser damim. Because Pesach itself, it's not written with furash by aninut. It's only written by ma'aser, and we learn that to the Pesach, which means like this: when I come and I want to learn Pesach to truma, I'm going to learn something which is written with furash in the Pesach to the truma. What's written with furash? V'chol arel lo yochel bo. Onen, that an onen cannot eat a korban Pesach. It's not written in korban Pesach. They learned that from ma'aser. Ma'aser to Pesach. So therefore, it's much better to learn from Pesach to Truma directly than going from Ma'aser to Pesach to Truma. So because of that, even doesn't matter how many are more or less. I don't care about that. It's much better to exclude Arel, which is written with Furash, the pasuk by Pesach, and not to include, right, the Aninun. Says the Gemara, Ima Pesach, right? He says, Ima Pesach, Milad Zekharav Adam Mekevet, Af Truma, Milad Zekharav Adam Mekevet. 1 second. Why don't we learn also to Shabbos Tafid that just like the Korban Pesach, you cannot eat the Korban Pesach if you still have a child or a slave and you do not do brit milah to them. So to by Truma. So says it says the pasuk umalta uto. This is in Parashat Bo. Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, this is not Pesach. It says by Pesach umalta uto az yachal. It says when you do the brit milah, then you could eat. Milad zekharav adam mekevet bo. But only bo. Bo was bo only in the Pesach, not by anything else. Okay, so says the you have to so. It also says by the arel bo. So therefore, I'm going to say bo and ochel. Why did, if you're already telling me that the bo is only in it and not in anything else, so it's also says by arel, only by arel. So says the Gemara, yeah, but active toshav esachir, it's already written toshav esachir. So since it's written toshav esachir, which is a gzira shava, so I wanted to say that it also applies to there. So says the Gemara, Maraita, why did you say that? Why are you telling me that you prefer to use the gzira shava to include, right, the arel? It says meptashan arel bo, which means to exclude. It's only by the Korban Pesach. So says the Gemara, mitztabra nenu t'gufay v'lel rebuye sheken maaseh b'gufo v'anush karet. He says it's much more better to include the arelut. Why? He says because there's a maaseh b'gufo, you have to do it in the goof of the human being. Plus, there's karet, the person doesn't do it with milah. So he says, other of the opposite. Milad zecharav avadav, you should actually add in the milad zecharav avadav, meaning the brit milah of his children or his slaves, because that's all the time that a person is obligated to do that. So says the Gemara, anas kofishin. Again, you have two chumrot by the arelut more than the arelut of zecharav avadav, and therefore it's still better to use that. By time I'm going to answer, velo anas kofishin, even without the extra thing of 2 and 1, you don't have to go to numbers, right? Nami lo matzidama, you still can't say it. Does it make sense that arelut of his goof is not ma'akev, and arelut of somebody else is going to be ma'akev? Here, this person, right? He has a brit milah, correct? He has a brit milah. Who doesn't have a brit milah? A child of his or a slave of his? Does it make sense? Look what we're doing here. His own brit milah is not ma'akev. He's got a brit milah, but even a brit milah of somebody else is going to be ma'akev. And therefore, because of that, it's much the opposite to oser arel b'achilat truma, and to say that en milad zecharav avadav me'akalto mi lo yachol b'truma. So says the Gemara, hashta damarta bo lidrasha u'deata, but now they just told me the word bo is coming to teach you a drasha. Kol benecha lo yochal bo lama li. So then why do you need the pasuk that says kol benecha lo yochal bo? Right? Why do you need bo? So answers the Gemara, because they're talking about obviously truma. So he says bo the Pesach hamarat dat poselet ve'en hamarat dat. Meaning, when you have a mumar, right? You know what a mumar is, right? A person that's a mumar, he's not allowed to eat it. So he says, but amarat dat is not posel b'maaser sheni. Meaning, a person could come and eat maaser sheni even though he's a mumar, but he cannot eat the Korban Pesach when he's a mumar. And that's why. So then the Gemara is going to continue, obviously, right? And so on and so forth. Continue tomorrow.